wearable technology, that's the big thing in technology in 2014.
Yes, yeah, and that's been particularly a hot topic at CES this year. You're seeing a lot of interest from a number of vendors who are developing wearable devices.
And wearable devices include smart watches, magical bands, which encapsulates fitness bands. Which one seems to be taking off right now, Julian?
Well, there's a couple of main trends that we're seeing in particular. So that's wearable devices on your wrist, whether that's a smartwatch, which acts as a companion to your smartphone, letting you know if someone's calling you or sending you a message. But the other trend is related to fitness, so tracking how much you walk or run or exercise on a daily basis.
And it's not just the technology companies that are investing in that, it's the fitness companies as well, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So Nike have already launched a wearable device for the wrist, the Fuel Band. Actually at CES this year, Intel have announced their intentions to produce or work with partners on wearable devices.
Do you think Sony can make inroads into this market, Julian? The Sony Core was unveiled at the CES on Monday. It's a fitness tracker. It integrates with an app called LifeLog, which it wants to make an open system, doesn't it? Do you think it'll catch on?
Well, it's an interesting one from Sony because it's not just tracking your health and what you're doing exercise-wise, but it's also tracking how you're using your smartphone. So it connects with your device and it will track what content you're listening to, what movies you're watching, and will give you a summary at the end of that. So interesting, not just health for Sony.
How long will it take, do you think, Julian, for all this to make sense to the consumer? I read a piece yesterday from one of our Bloomberg journalists that said it took 10 years for investors to make sense of the smartphone market, and at the end of those 10 years there's clarity. It's iOS or it's Android, it's Apple or it's Samsung. How long is it going to take for there to be clarity and standardization within this new space, within this wearable device space?
Well, certainly over the next year we're going to see a lot of growth, but at the moment it's still, the companies are discovering what is appetizing for consumers, what are they really going to get on board with, and I think it's going to be with wearable devices that have very specific functions as opposed to mimicking a smartphone or a technology that already exists.
Okay, outside of wearable devices, Julian, the big emergence last year was the onset of bigger smartphones, phablets. How is that going to evolve in 2014? Because Sony at the CES has gone the other way. It's launching a smaller phone. They think there's a market for a smaller phone that has all the power of a flagship phone. That's the Z1 Mini. Where are sizes going when it comes to smartphones?
So it does depend on the markets that the companies are operating in. So these larger screen devices, the phablets, they're particularly popular in Asian markets such as South Korea and Japan. The trend there is that where smartphones have been around for a significant amount of time, they're looking for a new mobile experience, which is what the larger screen devices offer. But there is also an awareness that not everyone has such big hands or wants to make a call with such a big device. So you're seeing Sony offer a similar experience with the camera and content on the device, but on a smaller form factor.
And bendable phones, which apparently improve the viewing experience if you're watching films. Is that going to catch on? Because this new curvable television was the big news on Monday, wasn't it, when the director Michael Bay stormed off that Samsung event.
Yes, absolutely. And 2013, we've seen a number of key launches from Sony, from Samsung and from LG, who have launched these curved devices. So at the moment, we're still seeing them as fairly niche products. But again, these companies are exploring and seeing what's possible and what's interesting to consumers.